Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into, well, the language, the whole architecture, really, and the strategy behind conversations in university life.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area.
It really is. And this isn't just about, learning how to chat better. It's about mastering a very specific, almost specialized ecosystem that genuinely shapes the next chapter of your life.
Absolutely. And what's really striking, when you look into this is how consistently university is framed as this kind of compressed social experiment.
Right.
You're thrown together with thousands of other people, often under pretty intense pressure. You've got academic deadlines, maybe financial stress, definitely some existential questioning going on.
Oh, for sure.
And the conversations that bubble up in that environment, they just naturally have higher stakes than, say, casual small talk you might have elsewhere.
Exactly. So our mission today really is to take all this research, all these insights from social psychology, academic strategies, even just anecdotal stuff, and pull out the practical, high-impact techniques and, importantly, the mindset shifts you need. We want to help you turn that common anxiety, the feeling of walking into a new social scene, into confident, meaningful connection. Because, and this is crucial, these conversations aren't just filler. They're not just social lubrication.
Yeah, not at all.
They're the absolute building blocks of your support systems, your lasting memories, and even your intellectual growth. They fundamentally shape the whole university experience. So let's frame this environment first. Why is the language of university life so different? I think it starts with those shared struggles, doesn't it? The ones that lead to those intense, often late-night bonds.
Yeah, the universality of the student experience is key. It's immediately relatable, and that shared context gives you endless ways to start a conversation. I mean, think about those classic, sometimes completely absurd, late-night negotiations.
Yes.
The research often points to this phenomenon of high-stakes, low-stakes debates that, only seem to happen after midnight.
I know exactly what you mean. Where else, honestly, besides maybe a dorm common room at 3 a.m, would you spend 40 minutes seriously debating the precise merits of instant ramen versus some questionable pasta concoction someone threw together?
Right.
It's that specific blend of the mundane, the slightly desperate, and the, intellectually ridiculous that just defines that student bond, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's not just wasted time either. That kind of friction, that shared absurdity, it actually serves as a psychological relief valve.
Interesting.
It lets students engage their minds, spar a bit, but without the pressure of grades or assessment. You build rapport based on mutual exhaustion and maybe a bit of dark humor.
Totally. But okay, jokes aside, that same environment can pivot really fast to something much more intense. The academic panics.
Oh, precisely. Those pre-exam, high stress, oh my God, the test is tomorrow study session.
We've all been there.
The whole conversational dynamic just shifts instantly. It becomes hyper-collaborative, pure survival mode. It's all about super fast information exchange, trying to decipher cryptic lecture notes, sharing mnemonic devices, desperately trying to confirm what material is actually going to be on the test.
And basically preventing a complete collective meltdown.
Exactly. Preventing the meltdown is key.
I vividly remember this one time, the sheer relief when one of those academic panics actually led to a breakthrough. We were prepping for this incredibly dense history exam, and 3 of us spent, I kid you not, a whole hour stuck on one concept, something about early modern state sovereignty.
Okay, yeah, dense stuff.
Totally. And we ended up drawing this ridiculously elaborate, completely messy diagram on a giant whiteboard, arrows everywhere, badly drawn kings, tons of exclamation points.
I can picture it.
And somehow seeing it visually and talking it through together, articulating it collaboratively, it just broke the mental block. That shared struggle, that aha moment together, you don't forget that.
That's such a perfect example because it highlights a really critical function of university conversation.
Right.
Collaborative cognition.
Right.
It's literally the process of using dialogue to refine ideas, to test them, to articulate these abstract concepts until they actually click and solidify in your mind. The conversation itself becomes the engine of learning, not just, a way to pass the time while you study.
And while the stakes are often academic, like you said, the environment also demands some pretty specific conversational skills just in the purely social sphere, too.
Absolutely. The social pressures are huge. Think about what some sources call the classic crisis, the dreaded party outfit crisis.
Oh, the outfit crisis, yes.
These are conversations that are all about communal self-assessment, right?
Right.
Trying to figure out, is this outfit too much for this party? Or maybe not enough to make the right impression? It sounds trivial, but it really highlights that shared anxiety of navigating a new adult identity.
It's totally a low-stakes debate about clothes. That's actually a high-stakes conversation about belonging and acceptance, isn't it?
Exactly.
You're all trying to figure out adulthood together, testing social norms, building mutual trust, one outfit critique at a time. The university environment just dramatically speeds up the need for that kind of relational communication.
And that acceleration gets even more intense because of the global nature of so many universities today. This international melting pot demands conversational skills that often go way beyond what you might be used to back home. It challenges pretty much every assumption you have about polite dialogue.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. I remember having this incredible conversation once with a student from Singapore. We were talking about the differences in our education systems, specifically how our big high school exit exams worked.
Okay.
And what was fascinating wasn't just the factual differences, but how our conversational styles were so different. Hers was very precise, very structured, and mine was, well, probably a lot more tangential and rambling.
And that contrast is precisely the value, right?
Yeah.
Those interactions constantly force you to examine your own intellectual assumptions. They broaden your perspective just by listening.
Yeah.
You learn so much simply by hearing how others experienced academic pressure or social hierarchies or family expectations in their home countries. It's like getting an immersion course in applied anthropology without even leaving campus.
And the exchange isn't always purely academic or high level either. The value of just sharing basic cultural experiences is huge. You know, maybe teaching someone from Europe how to make a proper over-the-top Thanksgiving dinner.
Or learning from them.
Exactly. Or learning about a traditional dish they make and the specific etiquette around eating it.
The sources really emphasize these seemingly small moments. They're actually crucial for bridging cultural gaps. They humanize the differences between you.
Speaking of humanizing, I had a roommate once from Germany, totally brilliant guy, but I introduced him to the great American tradition of the s'more.
Oh, wow. S'mores virgin.
He had literally never had one. And watching him try to manage the sticky molten marshmallow and the chocolate, he was just completely baffled, but also totally delighted by the absurdity of it.
Wow.
Those small acts of cultural exchange, those little connections, they become so important, especially if you're feeling homesick or a bit isolated. They're like the scaffolding for building that crucial support system.
That's precisely right. They create this kind of shared vulnerability through novelty, through trying something new together, and then zooming out a bit from the daily life stuff, the social details, we also need to recognize that university conversations are often defining the future.
Yeah.
They carry the weight of aspiration.
That's a huge weight, isn't it? Students are constantly sharing their dreams, but also their deepest anxieties about careers. They're giving and getting advice about what they actually want to do with their lives, which, let's be honest, often feels like an impossibly huge question at that age.
It does. And this is where the conversations take on this projective quality. They aren't just discussing the assignment that was due last week. They're talking about potential timelines for the future, networking strategies, what skills they need to acquire, having a peer group where you can safely share those ambitious goals or maybe those terrifyingly uncertain ones and get honest feedback and counsel. That's absolutely non-negotiable for figuring out life after graduation. It's basically peer-led career counseling happening organically.
So, okay, the pressure to perform academically, the social maneuvering, the global diversity, it all comes together in an environment where being able to communicate well isn't just a nice bonus. It's pretty much the core mechanism for survival and ultimately for future success. That definitely sets the stage for getting into the practical side of things.
Right, let's move into the practical application then, because the sources make it clear that the advice needs to be context specific. I mean, talking to your roommate about their overflowing trash bin isn't quite the same skill set as talking to a professor about their complex research, right?
Not at all. Different stakes, different dynamics entirely.
So we need to look at, let's say, 3 key domains here, starting with peer interactions, #, peer and group interactions, conflict and collaboration. Okay, peers. And the sources really highlight group projects as the perfect crucible, let's call it, for developing conflict management dialogue. They're often called, quite rightly, both a blessing and a curse.
Definitely more curse sometimes.
Well, yeah. But the thing is, the quality of the final project is almost entirely dependent on the quality of the team's internal conversations.
It's so much more than just dividing up the tasks, isn't it? It's about those essential processes, brainstorming together, making sure everyone's on the same page, delegating tasks fairly, And maybe most importantly, figuring out how to resolve the conflicts that inevitably pop up.
Absolutely. Conflicts over different work styles, different opinions on the direction, it's bound to happen.
Yeah.
The sources often bring up examples like, a project where students fundamentally disagreed on the approach. Maybe one person wanted purely quantitative data, another wanted a deep historical narrative. And maybe they debated it intensely for a couple of days. But eventually, that friction, hopefully productive friction, led them to a compromise. Maybe a hybrid approach that ended up being much stronger because it incorporated both perspectives.
That's the ideal outcome, isn't it? Learning how to communicate effectively, even when you really clash on opinions. Because you're constantly exposed to different viewpoints, different work ethics. You're inevitably going to meet people who approach problems in a way that feels completely alien to you.
And what's essential there is recognizing that the skill of disagreeing respectfully is paramount. The goal has to be avoiding those conversations turning into just a zero-sum shouting match.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It is. It means really training yourself to listen to the logic behind the other person's point, even if you totally disagree with their conclusion. You have to try and maintain an open mind and, crucially, be aware of your own biases about what counts as efficient or good quality work.
Okay, but let's push on that a bit. What about those situations in group projects where, frankly, one person is clearly coasting or their work is genuinely just not up to par? How does respectful disagreement work when you need to address competence or maybe even laziness without completely blowing up the group dynamic?
That's a great question. That's where you shift from intellectual debate to something more like performance management, right?
Right.
And the dialogue has to shift. It can't be you are wrong or you are lazy. It needs to be framed more like we as a group need to achieve a certain standard. The sources suggest relying heavily on pre-agreed standards or goals.
Okay, setting expectations early.
Exactly. If the group set a clear timeline and maybe some quality metrics at the very beginning, then the conversation becomes about a deviation from that neutral, agreed upon standard, not a personal attack. You might say something like, hey, just looking at our agreed timeline for Section B, the draft was due Tuesday, and it seems we're a bit behind. What resources do you need, or what's blocking you so we can get back on track?
That frames it as collaborative problem solving, not accusation. I like that.
Precisely. It requires that self-reflection and relying on objective criteria. Okay, now let's bring this closer to home into perhaps the most intimate and potentially volatile setting. Roommates.
Oh boy, roommates. Yeah.
This is where effective communication isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely crucial for maintaining your sanity and just having a positive living environment.
Amen to that.
It really boils down to setting clear boundaries from the start and being incredibly explicit about mutual respect, respect for each other's space, schedules, noise levels, cleanliness, you name it.
We probably all know or have heard the classic roommate conflict story, right? Like the student who's a total night owl up till 3 a.m. listening to, I don't know, lo-fi beats and having loud video calls.
The other one has a 6 a.m. lab.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That level of lifestyle clash is intense. How do you even start that conversation without causing an immediate defensive explosion?
Okay, this is the absolute prime context for the core tool that comes up again and again, using I statements.
Right, the I statements.
But it's more than just starting a sentence with I. There's a specific mechanical structure that makes them effective, and it usually has 3 parts. I feel X, naming a specific emotion, when Y, giving a specific non-judgmental description of the behavior, because Z, explaining the tangible impact it has on you.
Okay, can you walk us through that structure using the night owl scenario? How would you build that statement?
Sure. So instead of the accusatory, you're way too loud at night, you always wake me up, and I can't sleep, which just guarantees defensiveness.
Yep, walls go straight up.
You restructure it using the formula. I feel frustrated and honestly pretty exhausted. That's X, the emotion. When I hear the music and the calls going past 11 p.m. most nights. That's Y. A specific behavior. No judgment like you're being inconsiderate. Because I really need to get up at 6 a.m. for my chemistry lab, and being sleep deprived is seriously impacting my focus in class. That's Z, the concrete impact on you.
Okay, I see the difference. But what's the psychological magic there? Why does phrasing it that way potentially neutralize the defensiveness compared to just saying you're too loud?
The power of the I statement is that it removes the implied moral judgment and the accusation about their character. When you say you are loud, the other person hears you are a bad or inconsiderate roommate. Defense is up.
Right.
But when you say I feel frustrated when X happens, You are owning your emotional reaction. You're not attacking their autonomy or their character. You're simply stating your need and the impact of their behavior on you. This makes it much more likely they'll be receptive to finding a solution together rather than just reacting defensively.
That makes sense. It shifts the focus from blame to a shared problem that needs solving. And the final piece of that puzzle, of course, is compromise.
Exactly. Relationships, even roommate ones, are a two-way street. You're not just issuing demands, you're negotiating how to share a space. So, the resolution might involve the night owl agreeing to use headphones after 11 p.m., and maybe the early riser agrees to use earplugs or be extra quiet when they get up in the morning. It's about finding a solution that acknowledges both people's needs and schedules are valid. Hashtag be faculating. Approaching professors. Overcoming intimidation.
Okay, let's switch gears now and tackle the conversational setting that probably causes the most immediate anxiety for a lot of students. Approaching professors.
Yeah, the intimidation factor is real.
Many students seem to view professors almost as these untouchable gatekeepers rather than potential guides. But the value of making that connection is just immense, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. Building some kind of relationship with your professors is crucial, not just for immediate academic success, like getting clarification on a confusing assignment, but critically, for future career opportunities and deeper intellectual growth. They often hold the keys to research opportunities, crucial letters of recommendation, valuable networks.
So, if the biggest hurdle is that feeling of intimidation, how do we make that initial contact feel less terrifying and actually productive? What are the practical steps students can take?
Okay, first and foremost, you absolutely have to change your internal narrative about office hours.
Office hours, the ghost town.
Sometimes. But you need to understand, they are specifically time set aside, often mandated by the university, for student interaction. You are not bothering them. You are not imposing. You are utilizing a resource they are literally paid to provide for you.
That's a really important reframing. Okay, so step 1, show up. What's step 2?
Step 2, preparation. The sources are incredibly clear on this. Resist the temptation to just wing it.
Guilty as charged probably at some point.
We all are. But professors can immediately spot the difference between a student who's actually done the reading and thought about it and has a specific question versus someone who's just vaguely confused and is kind of hoping the professor will re-lecture the entire topic just for them.
Okay, so what does good preparation look like in practice?
It generally means 3 things. 1, before you go, review the syllabus, review your class notes related to your question. 2, actually try to formulate your question clearly, maybe even write it down, make it specific. So instead of, I don't get the assignment, try something like, I'm a bit confused about the relationship between concepts A and concept B as required for section 3 of the paper. Are we meant to synthesize them or argue they're independent? See the difference.
Much clearer. Specificity. Okay, and the third thing.
3, if you're thinking beyond just this one assignment, maybe hoping for mentorship or research opportunities down the line, do a quick lookup of their public research profile before you go. Know what their specialty is.
That third point, knowing their research, seems key. If you want to move beyond just a transactional, help me with this grade relationship. If I am confused about a paper topic, how could I strategically use that knowledge about their research to maybe shift the conversation towards mentorship?
Now that's the high leverage move. Let's say you're struggling with a paper on, 18th century trade routes, and you know from your quick search that this professor actually specializes in maritime history or the East India Company. You could transition by saying something like, Professor, while I was researching this assignment on trade routes, I actually came across some of your published work on the financing of the East India Company. I found the aspect about X really fascinating. I was wondering if maybe the economic constraints we're analyzing in this paper relate at all to the political leverage issues you discussed in your book.
Wow. Okay, that immediately signals something different, doesn't it? It shows you're not just trying to get an answer for the test, but you're engaging with their field as an intellectual peer, or at least an aspiring one. You're thinking deeply. It shows real investment.
Precisely. And related to this, if you are genuinely struggling with the material, you absolutely must ask for help. Professors, by and large, genuinely want their students to learn and succeed. Reaching out early when you're confused is always preferred to getting a panic, incoherent email the night before the deadline.
Now, let's look back to that idea of vulnerability we discussed earlier with peers. Would the sources suggest using vulnerability, like maybe sharing that you're feeling really overwhelmed or you're struggling with procrastination when you approach a professor? Or would that just come across as unprofessional, maybe a sign of weakness?
It's definitely a matter of context and careful framing. Sharing deep personal vulnerability is probably inappropriate and crosses a boundary. However, what you might call professional vulnerability can be highly encouraged and effective.
What's the difference?
You frame the struggle in terms of the academic subject matter or the learning process itself. So instead of saying, I'm totally overwhelmed by life and I just can't start this paper, you frame it as, I'm finding the scope of this research project a bit challenging to manage, and I'm struggling with how to best prioritize the steps. I was hoping you could offer some advice on structuring a manageable research outline.
Ah, I see. You're framing your difficulty as a process problem that they, as an expert educator, can help you solve. That actually demonstrates maturity and initiative, not weakness.
Exactly. And the payoff, as we noted earlier, can be substantial. Building a good rapport through multiple, well-prepared, thoughtful conversations can transform that professor from just a distant grader into a genuine mentor. And that can lead directly to those amazing opportunities, research projects, introductions to people in the field, and those incredibly valuable letters of recommendation later on. #C, intercultural communication, respect and awareness. Okay, shifting gears again, let's talk about the global campus. Intercultural communication demands a really high degree of cultural sensitivity, mainly because culture fundamentally affects communication style, often in ways we're not even conscious of.
Right.
For instance, think about the concepts of low context versus high context cultures. Does that terminology ring a bell?
It sounds kind of technical. Can you break down what that means in practice?
Sure. So a low context culture, which is pretty common in places like Germany, the US, maybe Scandinavia, tends to value directness, clarity, and explicit communication. If they need something done or disagree with something, they'll usually state it pretty plainly. Words mean what they say.
Okay, straightforward.
A high context culture, on the other hand, common in places like Japan, China, many parts of the Middle East, Latin America relies much more heavily on nonverbal cues, shared history, implicit understanding, and established social hierarchy. Communication is layered. They might communicate refusal or critique much more indirectly, perhaps through nuance, strategic silence, or even elaborate phrasing rather than a blunt no or I disagree.
Wow. Okay. So if I'm in a group project discussion with someone from a more high context culture, their silence might not mean they agree with my idea at all. It could actually mean they're politely refusing or disagreeing. That feels like a massive potential minefield for misunderstanding.
It absolutely is a tripwire. And the key isn't to memorize rules for every culture, but simply to cultivate awareness. To navigate this and hopefully avoid a major cultural faux pas, your basic toolkit needs about 3 elements: preparation, observation, and adaptability.
Okay, let's break down that toolkit. How do I prepare for a conversation with someone whose cultural background I might know very little about?
Firstly, if you know where someone is from, maybe do some quick, respectful background reading, not to stereotype, never stereotype, but just to get a general insight into communication norms. Are they generally more direct or indirect? How important is hierarchy? How is conflict typically handled? Just getting a sense of the landscape.
Okay, research. What's next?
Secondly, be hyper-observant in the moment. Pay really close attention to how they interact, not just with you, with their peers, or with superiors if you see it.
Yeah.
Do they tend to interrupt or wait patiently? How much eye contact do they maintain? What's their use of silence like? Is it comfortable or awkward?
And then adapt based on those observations.
Exactly. Try to gently adapt your own behavior to sort of match the pace and formality they seem comfortable with. Sometimes this is called mirroring, but it has to be done with genuine respect and subtlety, not like you're mimicking them, which would be offensive.
Okay, subtle adaptation. And if, inevitably, because we're all human, a mistake is made, you say something that lands wrong, what's the recovery procedure?
Keep it simple. Apologize sincerely, briefly, and then move on. People are usually incredibly understanding of cultural missteps, especially if your positive intent was clear. The key is not to over-apologize or make a huge dramatic performance out of it, because that can often create more awkwardness. A simple, "Oh, I apologize. I realize now that phrasing might have been insensitive in this context. Thanks for your patience," is usually perfectly sufficient.
That makes sense. Keep it brief, sincere, move forward. This leads us directly, I think, to the really tricky nature of humor across cultures. Humor feels like it's often the first casualty of intercultural exchange.
It's the conversational equivalent of walking a tightrope over a canyon, honestly. Humor is so deeply subjective. It relies heavily on shared cultural understanding of irony, sarcasm, current events, social norms, what topics are considered taboo.
Yeah.
What's absolutely hilarious in one culture, maybe based on some political satire or local reference, might be completely inaccessible or worse, deeply offensive in another culture?
We talked earlier about avoiding controversial topics like politics. But I think the temptation is always there, isn't it? To crack a joke or use a bit of sarcasm, maybe just to lighten the mood or build rapport quickly.
That temptation really needs to be resisted, at least until a relationship is very firmly established and you've built a high degree of mutual trust and understanding. The sources strongly advise sticking to universally safe, common ground subjects when you're initially building rapport.
Like what?
Yeah.
What's universally safe?
We're talking about the weather, honestly. The struggles of the semester deadlines, exams, or maybe the truly universally relatable awfulness of the university cafeteria food.
Haha, yes. The bad cafeteria food bridge. Always reliable.
Exactly. Those shared low-stakes gripes create a comfortable, positive common ground before you venture into more nuanced or potentially sensitive territory. Definitely avoid politics, religion, asking overly personal questions about family or finances unless they bring it up first. These topics are often guarded very differently depending on cultural norms.
Now that you mention it, I have this painful memory from my first week of university. I tried to tell this really complicated, highly sarcastic story. It was basically a joke that relied entirely on understanding a specific bit of UK cultural context to a group of international students.
Oh dear, how did it go?
It completely, utterly bombed. Just blank stares. And then one person very politely asked, "But? What was the punchline, please?" It was excruciating in the moment.
Oh, that scenario is agonizingly common. But you know what? Those painful moments are actually incredibly valuable learning experiences in cultural nuance.
I suppose so, in retrospect.
The learning there is that the primary function of conversation, especially early on in an intercultural context, isn't necessarily to impress with your wit or humor. It's to establish safety, trust, and connection. You learn very quickly that your particular conversational toolkit had geographical limitations. Those instances, though maybe embarrassing at the time, are invaluable for rapidly improving your cultural adaptability.
Okay, let's really drill down into the mechanics now. This is the how-to section where we break down conversation into skills that are highly learnable, really actionable, and we have to start with small talk, right? Which isn't just filler, it's like the necessary friction needed to open the door to a real connection.
Exactly. And the primary technique here, the first tool in the box, is mastering the open-ended question strategy. This requires a conscious, deliberate shift away from those closed questions that basically invite a one-word answer.
Because closed questions just kill the momentum dead, right?
Instantly, yeah.
You need to move beyond the yes-no binary. So instead of the classic, "Did you have a good weekend?" which just gets you a yeah or nah, what's the mechanical improvement? How do we open it up?
You use the what, how, why framework to actively encourage elaboration.
Yeah.
So instead of asking if they had a good weekend, you ask, what did you get up to this weekend? Or how did you spend the time off? This immediately gives the other person more space, more freedom to elaborate, and critically, it offers you potential threads to pull on in their answer. Some people call this the funneling technique.
The funneling technique. I like that name. It forces them to give you more than just a yes-no, giving you actual information to work with. Because I think a lot of people get stuck after that other classic question, what do you study? They ask it, get a technical answer like molecular physics or medieval history, and then their mind just goes completely blank.
That is such a common failure point. And the solution isn't to immediately panic and change the subject because you feel intimidated or ignorant. The solution is to deploy the next crucial skill, asking good follow-up questions. This is absolutely core. Follow-up questions are how you show genuine interest, and they're how you maintain the conversation's momentum. So if they say they study molecular physics, you don't just nod and say, oh, wow, that sounds hard. You ask something like, what first got you interested in molecular physics? Or maybe, what's the most surprising thing you've learned this semester in that field? Or how does that connect to...
Okay. That transition moving from the transactional query, what do you do, to genuine curiosity, why do you do it, or what's interesting about it, that's what makes the conversation feel personal, doesn't it? It signals, I'm actually interested in you and your motivation, not just checking a box.
Exactly right. And the kind of highest level of this technique involves remembering details over time. Building a more lasting connection often comes down to recalling those small, seemingly insignificant details from previous conversations. Like if someone casually mentioned last week that they're training for a marathon, the next time you see them, ask them how their training is going. That little bit of effort, remembering that detail, shows you were genuinely engaged in deep, active listening before. and it validates their previous contribution. It proves you cared enough to actually retain the information.
That leads perfectly into the next core skill, which is active listening itself and engagement. This feels crucial for making that leap from just basic small talk to forming a real connection. It's about really picking up on both the verbal and the nonverbal cues and asking those clarifying questions.
Yeah, active listening goes way beyond just politely waiting for your turn to speak. It really involves, let's say, 3 key components: paraphrasing, clarifying, and sometimes synthesizing.
Okay, break those down.
Paraphrasing is briefly repeating back what you heard them say, but in your own words. Something like, okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying the main challenge is X. This confirms your tracking. Clarifying involves asking focused questions to fill in any gaps in your understanding. Could you give me a specific example of what you mean by that? Or, when you say systemic issue, what does that look like in practice?
Yep.
And synthesizing is maybe a slightly higher level skill where you connect what they're saying now to something they mentioned earlier in the conversation, showing you're tracking the whole narrative.
That shows a really high level of intellectual engagement, not just passive reception. Okay, but what about those moments we all dread when the conversation just stalls or gets awkward? Handling awkwardness needs its own specific toolkit, right?
Definitely.
That moment when you feel completely out of your depth, maybe you don't understand the topic they're passionate about, maybe your mind goes blank on what to say next, maybe you've even forgotten their name 5 minutes after meeting them.
We've all been there.
The key you're saying is to remember the goal is always connection, not putting on a perfect performance.
Exactly. And the first rule for handling that out-of-your-depth moment is simple acceptance. If someone's talking enthusiastically about, I don't know, quantum entanglement, and you know literally nothing about it, don't just nod blankly and pretend.
Which is so tempting.
So tempting. Instead, gracefully admit it, and politely with a curious but honest admission. Something like, wow, that sounds absolutely fascinating, but I have to stop you for a second because I'm completely unfamiliar with that whole concept. Could you maybe explain the underlying principle to me like I'm, say, back in high school?
Huh. That's brilliant. It does 2 things, right? It elevates them, positions them as the expert, and it turns your ignorance into a genuine opportunity for them to teach you something, which most people enjoy. You learn without faking it.
Precisely. Yeah. Okay, secondly, in the awkwardness toolkit, we need to deploy vulnerability, but strategically as a tool for relatability. We touched on this before. Sharing a small, relatable flaw or a common struggle makes you instantly seem more human, more approachable.
We used the procrastination example earlier when talking with peers, which makes total sense. But let's think about another common university anxiety people feel awkward about. The pressure to find internships or figure out career stuff. How could vulnerability work there?
That's a great example because almost every student feels inadequate or overwhelmed by that pressure. You could share something authentic like, ugh, I spent about 3 hours yesterday just staring at LinkedIn job descriptions, and honestly, I felt totally paralyzed by the sheer number of required skills. I basically had to force myself to just apply to one thing, even though I felt completely unqualified. People will universally relate to that feeling of inadequacy or imposter syndrome. It creates immediate common ground, maybe even mutual support. Because everyone feels awkward or unsure sometimes, being authentic about it is often the antidote to the awkwardness itself.
That feels really powerful. Admitting a small imperfection actually makes you more approachable, which is kind of the opposite of the pressure we often feel to appear flawless and totally put together.
Precisely. Okay, let's add maybe 2 more very practical tools to this awkwardness toolkit.
Yeah.
Learning how to make a graceful exit and how to recover when you forget someone's name.
Yes, the graceful exit. Crucial skill.
When you need to end a conversation politely, maybe you need to get to class, maybe you just need to escape, you don't just abruptly turn and walk away, use a brief transition statement. It should ideally validate the conversation you just had and then clearly state your reason for leaving your next task. For example, wow, I really enjoyed hearing about your research idea. That's so interesting. I need to make sure I catch the beginning of this next presentation, though. Hopefully we can continue this chat another time.
Smooth. Okay. And the name forgetting. That instant dread when you realize you met them 5 minutes ago and their name is just gone.
The void. Okay, option 1. If the opportunity arises naturally and it doesn't feel too awkward, just acknowledge it quickly and honestly. I'm so sorry, my brain just blanked. Can you remind me of your name? Option 2, often smoother. Introduce them to a third party. If you're with a friend, introduce your friend first. Then gesture to the person whose name you forgot and say invitingly to them, and please introduce yourself to my friend. They'll usually say their name.
Sneaky.
Or if you're alone, you can offer your contact details first. Hey, it was great chatting. Let me add you on LinkedIn quickly. What name should I look up? That usually forces them to state their name clearly for you.
Clever workarounds. Okay, finally in this section, let's briefly touch on the unspoken conversation, nonverbal cues.
Right. While a lot of the sources focus heavily on the verbal mechanics, the words we use, the nonverbal element underpins and reinforces everything we've discussed. Your physical attention, your nodding, maintaining an open posture, using appropriate eye contact, which, remember, varies culturally. So be mindful.
Right, context again.
These things communicate volumes beyond your actual words. They signal genuine interest, engagement, and respect. If you're leaning in slightly, keeping an open posture, like not crossing your arms defensively, nodding appropriately as they speak, you're non-verbally signaling, I am mentally and physically present right now, and I value what you are sharing. It makes a huge difference. So if we try to pull all these different threads together, if there's one core overarching takeaway that kind of consolidates all these techniques and tools, it's really this fundamental mindset shift. Conversation is a skill, not some innate talent you're either born with or not.
That feels important.
It is. Being a good conversationalist is actually more like a technical discipline. It's something that can be actively practiced, deliberately refined over time.
Yep.
It requires consistent mindfulness, paying attention, and definitely a willingness to step outside your comfort zone sometimes.
I think for so many students, maybe myself included back in the day, the biggest barrier is just getting so caught up in the fear of saying the wrong thing that you end up just staying silent instead. The fear of failure or just looking foolish, it paralyzes the attempt.
And that is the classic trap, the one we really need to dismantle. But let's analyze it logically. Think about the actual consequence of silence versus the consequence of maybe a moment of awkwardness. If you say something a bit awkward, or maybe it doesn't land right, okay, it feels uncomfortable for a second, you move on. Maybe you even learned a small nuance for next time. But if you consistently choose silence, you absolutely guarantee that you miss out on a potential connection, a potential learning opportunity, maybe finding a crucial piece of support when you need it. That consequence of silence is almost always far worse, far more limiting than the risk of a brief conversational flub.
So I need to consciously reframe it in my head. It's not a performance where I have to deliver perfectly witty lines or demonstrate flawless technical knowledge every time I open my mouth.
Exactly.
It's purely about trying to make an authentic connection, and that connection is usually driven more by genuine curiosity than by trying to impress.
Precisely. We are fundamentally challenging that deep-seated fear of performance. The goal isn't performance. The goal is connection. And we've discussed so many practical strategies today, those I statements, asking good open-ended questions, the components of active listening, even strategically embracing a bit of vulnerability. These are your tools. They're concrete, and they are mechanically learnable with practice.
Okay, but when you list them all out, like the three-part I statement structure, the funneling technique for questions, the 3 bits of active listening, it can still feel like an awful lot to remember and juggle in the heat of a real social moment. That feeling of being overwhelmed by the rules could easily lead someone right back to just staying silent again.
That's a very fair point. That feeling of overwhelm is real, and we address that directly with what we might call the small step strategy. The key is you cannot master everything all at once. It's impossible. This strategy involves deliberately focusing on mastering just one specific tool or technique for a set period, maybe a week, before you even think about adding another one to your active repertoire. This approach builds confidence through small wins and helps create sustainable habits over time rather than trying to overhaul everything overnight.
That sounds almost like giving yourself communication homework, but maybe necessary homework if you really want to improve. Could we formalize that a bit for the listener? What might, say, the first 3 weeks of applying the small step strategy actually look like in practice?
Okay, yeah, let's map it out. Week 1, focus purely on observation and presence. For this entire week, your sole active goal in every interaction is to manage your nonverbal communication. Focus consciously on maintaining open body language, making appropriate eye contact, remembering cultural differences. You are practicing simply being physically and mentally present and observant. You're not necessarily trying to speak more yet, just tune in better.
Okay, presence first. Week 1.
Week 2, master the follow-up question. Now you add a verbal goal. Your mission this week is to ask at least one high-quality, non-superficial follow-up question in every single conversation you have, no matter how brief. When someone answers your initial question, resist the urge to immediately change the topic. Instead, ask them why they think that, or how they reached that conclusion, or what happened next. This directly trains your active listening muscle and keeps the focus on them.
One good follow-up per chat. Got it. Week 3.
Week 3. Practice the I statement structure. This week you focus on conflict or boundary setting. For any minor conflict that arises or any difficult boundary you need to establish, maybe with a roommate or a peer in a group project, consciously and rigorously employ that 3-part I feel X when Y happens because Z structure. Even if it feels a bit robotic at first, practice the mechanics. This trains your ability to articulate difficult things clearly and without accusation.
That structure, small, focused, actionable steps each week, makes a lot of sense. It builds confidence by creating these small, repeatable wins rather than feeling like you have to become a perfect conversationalist overnight. And finally, I think it's crucial we remember that the most valuable, maybe even the most formative conversations don't always happen in those formal, high-stakes settings like classrooms or office hours.
Oh, absolutely. The power of informal settings is immense. We really need to remind listeners that incredibly valuable conversations often happen everywhere else. Waiting in the queue for that truly terrible campus coffee. Just hanging out in the dorm room late at night on those impromptu late-night pizza runs. It's often in these more relaxed environments, completely free from the pressure of assessment or performance, that true intellectual sparks or personal breakthroughs can actually occur.
I can definitely confirm that from experience. Some of the most creative ideas I ever had for really difficult essays or challenging projects genuinely seemed to strike during those late-night, totally relaxed conversations, just casually bouncing ideas off each other with roommates or friends. It's precisely the low-stakes environment that encourages a bit more risk-taking in your thinking.
Absolutely. Those informal conversations create the perfect environment for genuine intellectual risk-taking, for trying out half-formed ideas. And honestly, the connections you forge during those relaxed, sometimes silly, formative conversations, those can easily last a lifetime. #outro.
So today we took a really deep dive into mastering the unique and often challenging language of university life. We looked at the bonding power of shared struggles, everything from late-night academic panic to those bigger conversations about future aspirations. Then we focused on mastering specific contexts, giving you some high-leverage tools for navigating peer interactions and conflict, for strategically approaching professors who might seem intimidating, and for successfully bridging those tricky cultural gaps with respect and awareness.
And maybe most importantly, we try to arm you with a practical mechanical communication toolkit. Things like the funneling technique for asking better open-ended questions, the 3 key components of real active listening, the specific structure of effective I statements for conflict.
And that core mindset shift.
And that essential realization that conversation is fundamentally a learnable skill, something that genuinely improves with structured, mindful practice. Please don't let the pressure to perform perfectly silence you.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Something to really mull over. Think about this. The conversations you're having right now, yeah, even the seemingly trivial ones about which instant pasta is marginally better at 3 a.m., or those more tentative ones where you're first starting to share your real career goals and fears. These are the very interactions that forge deep, lasting human connections.
They really are.
The individuals you connect with through these unique, formative university dialogues, they won't just define your university experience while you're there. Very often, they become your lifelong network. They can influence your career path, shape your personal growth in unexpected ways, and ultimately, they become a defining, deeply human part of your own story. So dive in. Don't let fear keep you waiting on the sidelines. Okay, let's unpack this. We've all been there, right? You've sort of mastered the foundational social skills. You can walk into a room, handle the small talk, weather, whatever.
Yeah, the basics. Introductions, initial chats. You can do that.
Exactly. Confidently introduce yourself, handle that first conversation. But then you hit a wall.
Yeah, you do.
And that wall, I think, is the complexity of modern relationships, the messiness.
Conflict, digital stuff.
Yeah, the conflict, the ambiguity of digital life, and just the sheer effort it takes to turn that, brief spark into something lasting.
That's a really good way to put it. If phase 1 is getting your foot in the door.
Right.
Then this next phase, the one we're really diving into today, it's about managing the friction, the stuff that happens once you're inside.
Okay. So we're moving past just engagement.
Way beyond simple engagement, yeah. We're focusing on, 3 really complex, practical challenges. Visual communication first.
Okay.
Then high-stakes conflict resolution. Think difficult conversation. And finally, the intentional architecture of relationships, how you actually build them.
So our mission today is basically moving you, the listener, from just being a competent conversationalist to being like a strategic communicator.
Precisely. We want to give you the frameworks, the mental models.
And the language, like what to actually say.
And the practical language models, exactly. For those moments when the stakes are highest, or maybe when the context is thinnest, like online.
And we have to start there, don't we, with that context?
We really do. Just look at the reality today. So many critical conversations.
Yeah.
Time-sensitive ones, potentially relationship-defining ones. They don't happen face-to-face anymore. Not most.
They're all happening through screens.
Entirely through screens. Texts, group chats, huge ones sometimes, Slack, DMs, emails. We're managing complex tasks, emotional stuff, all through text.
And this is where it gets, well, really interesting and tricky. Because when you strip away all the nonverbal cues, the body language, the facial expressions, that specific tone of voice, stuff that accounts for, what, like 70% of meaning?
Easily 70%, maybe more, yeah.
What you're left with is this massive, frustrating, well, it's a minefield, isn't it, of potential misinterpretation.
Oh, absolutely. It creates instant anxiety.
Yeah.
Manufactured anxiety, almost.
Yeah.
Think about that classic scenario. We've all had it. You send a detailed message, maybe a complex question.
Right. To a colleague or a friend.
Yeah. And they reply with just one word. Okay? Maybe with a period.
Oh, the period. That's the killer.
Right. The instant reaction is never like, oh, great, they got it.
No. You stare at that, okay, and you think, wait, why so cold?
Uh-huh. Is that period aggressive? Are they mad?
Did I say something wrong? This okay does not feel okay.
Exactly. And that anxiety, it's rooted in something real. Psychologists call it the negativity bias.
Negativity bias.
Yeah. When those nonverbal cues are gone, our brain tends to default to interpreting ambiguity, especially short messages, as negative, as potentially threatening.
So the sender probably just meant.
They probably just meant, got it, understood, and moved on. Quick confirmation.
But the receiver,
yeah,
staring at the phone.
You interpret the lack of warmth, the finality of that period, as like passive-aggressive rage.
Wow. Okay. That's the daily challenge then. Translating intent in this contextless void.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's tough. So if so many critical conversations are happening online now, we absolutely need to start by building some structure for clarity.
We have to.
Let's tackle section 1, the digital minefield. How do we make sure our digital interactions are clear, kind, and, actually effective when we're fighting that negativity bias?
It boils down to intentionality.
Really?
Intentionality.
Yeah.
Because technology strips away those natural signals of empathy, right? So you have to consciously put them back in.
You mean you have to add the empathy?
You have to inject it. We need clear, maybe even slightly rigid digital etiquette rules because the lack of nonverbals demands intentional clarity and a continuous, deliberate projection of empathy.
Okay. Let's start with maybe the most common tool. One you say is essential, not just decorative.
Yes.
The strategic use of the emoji.
Absolutely essential. Emojis are basically your digital nonverbal cues. They're shorthand for your tone, your facial expression.
Right.
Think about a simple work message. I need the draft files by 5 p.m. today.
Okay, sounds direct, maybe a little blunt.
Exactly. If you receive that, it can sound like a cold command. From a boss, maybe, it could create stress, resentment even.
But if you just add...
But if you write, I need the draft files by 5 p.m. today, and that little smiley face, it changes everything.
It's like a tonal translator.
It is.
Yeah.
The person gets the same core info at the deadline, but the emoji shifts it. From a rigid demand to a friendly, approachable request.
So you're signaling, hey, this is necessary, but I'm asking nicely.
Pretty much. And I'm approachable. It's a small thing, but it kind of inoculates the interaction against accidental drama, against that automatic negative read.
Okay, but context matters here, right? You can't just sprinkle emojis everywhere, surely.
Oh, definitely not. That's where digital maturity, comes in. You have to read the room
Right.
or read the platform.
So like a formal email to a senior person you barely know, probably no smiley face.
Probably not, no. It might undermine your seriousness. But an internal Slack chat with your team, people you talk to every day,
Yeah.
or text thread with a friend, the emoji might actually be mandatory for warmth. It prevents misunderstandings.
So the rule is?
The rule is basically this. If your message could be read negatively because it's short or direct, use a positive emoji to hedge against that. just in case. If your message is already long, detailed, polite,
Then maybe it's overkill?
then it's optional, yeah. You probably don't need it.
That's a great distinction, using it to hedge against negativity. It's not just fluff, it's like risk management for communication.
Exactly right. It's basically like saying, hey, just so you know, I'm smiling while I type this.
Right.
And that visual cue stops the other person from defaulting to that negative assumption, which happens so easily when people are stressed or busy.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to a bigger challenge now. Something that plagues, well, university life and work life.
Wow.
The chaos of the project group chat.
Yeah, yes. The bane of existence for many.
We've all been in one. It starts okay, focused, but then it just dissolves into this notification nightmare. Important stuff gets buried under, like, 5 memes, random stories.
And 2 people asking the exact same question that someone answered 10 messages ago.
Yes. Why does that happen?
It's usually a failure to respect the collective cognitive load. Sounds academic, but meaning every time that chat pings, it pulls attention and mental energy from everyone in the group.
Right. Even if it's irrelevant to me.
Exactly. And if 90% of those pings are irrelevant memes, side chats, the whole group starts to tune out. They mute it, they ignore it.
Which means when something actually important comes through.
Like a deadline change. It gets missed. Total breakdown.
So how do we fix this without being the annoying chat police? You mentioned 2 golden rules: organization and courtesy.
Right. Golden rule number 1 is segmentation. Know when to go private.
Okay, segmentation.
It's about respecting notification fatigue. If you have a question for just one person,
Like, hey, Sarah, did you find that article we talked about?
perfect example. Send Sarah a direct message, a private message. Don't ping all 8 people in the project chat for something only Sarah needs to see.
That seems so obvious, but people don't do it. The principle is efficiency and courtesy.
Absolutely. Use the group chat only for stuff everyone needs to know. Deadline changes, big decisions, key files uploaded, everything else. It's just noise.
And noise costs the group. It makes people ignore the important signals.
Exactly. When every ping matters, people pay attention. When most pings are noise, the channel becomes useless. That's when things fall apart.
Okay, so segmentation is rule 1. What about rule 2? For keeping the actual discussion clear.
That's more of a technical courtesy. Use the reply feature.
Ah, the reply button in WhatsApp, Slack, whatever.
Yes. In those fast-moving chats, it's crucial. Someone asks a complex question about, say, part C, then 3 people post memes or chat about lunch.
Right. The question gets buried.
And if you just type the answer later, scrolling back, people might not know which question your answer belongs to.
Which could lead to confusion, maybe someone asking again, or worse, acting on the wrong info.
Precisely. But if you use the platform's reply function,
It links your answer directly to the question, visually.
exactly, it visually connects your comment to the original message. It forces a kind of chronological coherence.
So even if someone missed an hour of chat,
They can scroll back and clearly see which answer goes with which question, which instruction relates to which task. It kills redundant questions and ensures everyone's on the same page.
wow. That simple click really shifts the chat from being this messy river of text to like a structured, traceable record.
It's a huge difference. It's the difference between chaos and actual project management. And it's totally within our control as users.
Okay. Group chats managed. Now let's get personal. Let's talk about the anxiety in one-on-one digital chats, specifically the dreaded double text.
Ah, the double text. So much angst.
Right. For so many people, sending 2 messages in a row feels like this huge sign of neediness or desperation.
It's definitely a nuanced one. Context, again, is absolutely everything. We have to separate the unacceptable kind from the perfectly acceptable, useful kind.
Let's start with the unacceptable, the one driven by pure anxiety.
Yeah, that's what we call spamming for acknowledgement.
Spamming for acknowledgement.
Yeah, it's when you send a message, a question, an invite, whatever, and maybe 5 minutes pass, no reply yet.
Okay. Impatience mounting.
And so you follow up with just or, hello, or did you get my message?
Yeah, that feels bad.
It's a massive violation of digital boundaries, really,
Why specifically?
because it shows a profound lack of respect for the other person's time, their autonomy.
Right, you're implying your need for an instant reply outweighs whatever they might be doing.
Exactly. They could be in a meeting, driving, studying, sleeping, or just, taking a mental break from their phone. That kind of pressure is suffocating, and it often breeds resentment.
So the core advice has to be patience. Just wait.
Patience, absolutely. Trust that they'll reply when they can. Your self-worth can't be tied to how fast someone texts you back.
That's key. The delay is almost never about you.
Rarely ever. It's about their life, their circumstances. If you find yourself constantly wanting to send those follow-up question marks, that's a sign you need to work on your own reaction to waiting, not harass the other person.
Okay, so that's the bad double text. But you said there's an acceptable kind when it's purely utilitarian.
Yes. The acceptable context is strictly about adding necessary, forgotten utility.
Utility, like useful info.
Exactly. You send a message and then immediately realize you forgot something crucial or made a mistake.
That's example.
Okay, you text, meet me at the lecture hall at 2 p.m. Send. Then you realize, oh wait, you text again immediately. Oh, hang on, forgot to say the registration desk there is cash only.
Okay. In that case, the second text is helpful. You're adding value, preventing a problem.
Correct. The intent isn't about your anxiety. It's external. It's informational. You're double texting to solve a problem for the conversation, for the logistics.
Not to solve your own need for attention.
That's the critical difference. It's an act of clarity, not an act of neediness.
Okay. Managing these digital boundaries, the tone, the group chaos, the double text anxiety, that really feels like the foundation for these next level skills.
It is. You've handled the low stakes, high frequency digital stuff.
So now let's transition. Let's talk about moments where the stakes feel incredibly high. We're moving out of the chat window.
And into the confrontation room, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
Sometimes literally.
Yeah. Let's shift gears. Section 2. Mastering difficult conversations.
This is a big one. For so many people, just the idea of conflict or giving negative feedback, especially to a peer.
It triggers that freeze or flight thing. Avoidance.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's arguably the highest hurdle in academic life, professional life, relationships in general.
Okay, let's ground this. Let's use that classic universal problem. The group project slacker.
Oh, everyone knows the one.
Right. Every team seems to have one. Someone clearly not pulling their weight. The grade's at risk. Tensions are super high.
Yep.
How do you confront that person, address the problem, without completely blowing up the relationship or starting a huge fight?
This is where we need what I call the superpower of constructive criticism.
A superpower.
It really is. But before we even get to the how, the framework, we have to lock down the fundamental goal, the absolute rule.
Which is?
You are there to address the observable behavior or the concrete impact of the problem. You are absolutely 100% forbidden.
Forbidden. Strong word.
Forbidden from attacking the person's character.
Okay. But when I'm stressed about that deadline, my first instinct, my lizard brain reaction, is totally character-based.
Like what?
Like, you are so lazy, or why are you always dropping the ball?
Right. And those character attacks, they fail instantly, every time.
Why? Because they make the other person defensive.
Exactly. You trigger their deepest threat response.
Yeah.
You attack their worth, their identity, their brain's emotional center, the amygdala, just lights up. Defense mode activated.
So the conversation stops being about the project.
And immediately becomes a battle. They have to justify themselves, protect their ego. The project issue is forgotten.
Okay. So the superpower is delivering the difficult truth, but somehow keeping the other person feeling psychologically safe.
That's it, precisely. And the best tool we have for balancing that truth and safety is a structured approach. You've probably heard of it, the feedback sandwich.
The feedback sandwich, yes. Sounds a bit corporate jargony.
It can sound that way, yeah. But it works because it deliberately flanks the tough message, the criticism, with positive stuff, affirmation.
Why does that help?
It lowers the other person's defenses. It helps maintain an atmosphere of collaboration, not attack.
Okay. Let's break it down meticulously. 3 layers, right? Part 1, the positive bread.
Layer 1 is the affirmation. You must start the conversation with something genuine and specific, something that affirms their value, acknowledges a real contribution they made.
So not just generic fluff like, you're a great person.
No, that sounds totally manipulative. It has to be concrete. Like, hey, I really appreciated the creative angle you brought in our brainstorming last week. Your ideas really got us going on the right track.
So that opening signals respect, support, not just hostility.
Exactly. It buys you the right, in a way, to deliver the difficult message that's coming. It establishes that crucial psychological safety. It basically says, I value you in our work together, but there's an issue we need to tackle as a team.
If you just lead with the attack, you've got no chance.
0 chance of a constructive outcome. Okay, layer 2.
Part 2, the filling, the criticism itself, the moment of truth. How do we state the problem clearly gently, focusing on impact, not character.
The filling needs to be clear, concise, and ideally measurable. Focus on the external consequences. Stick to the facts.
So, using our slacker example.
You state the problem by pointing to the gap, the observable fact. You might say, hey, I noticed that the background research for Section B, which was due yesterday, hasn't been added to the shared drive yet.
Okay, factual, not accusatory yet. What's the critical next step? You said use I statements.
Absolutely crucial. You pivot immediately from the objective fact the research isn't there to the subjective consequence for the team, phrased from your perspective.
So like?
And I'm starting to feel concerned about hitting our overall deadline, which is coming up pretty fast.
Notice the shift there. You didn't say you missed the deadline.
Right.
You said, I am concerned about hitting our bot deadline. It frames it as a shared problem, affecting you, not just their failing.
It removes the accusation entirely. You're communicating the measurable fact, missing research, and the consequence, risk to the deadline, both external things, instead of judging their internal motivation or their work ethic. Keeps the focus on the task.
Okay, I have to push back a bit here, though. For a lot of listeners, myself included sometimes, the feedback sandwich can feel, well, manipulative. Doesn't the other person just know you're softening them up?
That's a really critical point. And yes, if the sandwich is used insincerely, like you're just going through the motions, it absolutely feels manipulative. It can backfire badly.
So how do you make it work?
The key is authenticity in the bread slices, part 1 and part 3, and rigor, or objectivity in the filling part 2.
Authenticity and rigor.
Yeah. If you genuinely do value something they did, say it sincerely in part 1. If you genuinely are concerned about the deadline, express that real concern in part 2. The framework isn't meant to hide an attack. It's meant to structure a difficult dialogue respectfully.
So it forces the giver of the feedback to be balanced and empathetic, not just venting anger.
Exactly. It makes you more thoughtful. It works because it respects the receiver's humanity and their need for support, even when there's a problem.
Okay, that distinction helps. The structure provides the container, but the content has to be sincere.
Couldn't say it better myself. Okay, final layer. Part 3, the collaborative bread.
Right, bringing it back to support.
This is where you restore the supportive context and, crucially, offer a path forward. You wrap up by framing it as a team effort again. Offer help or ask for clarity about what's going on.
So what would that sound like?
You could say something like, I know things can get busy. Is everything okay on your end? Let us know if we can maybe rejig the workload a bit, or if there's anything we can do to help you get started on that research piece today.
Wow. That completely changes the feel. It goes from you failed us to how can we as a team solve this problem together?
Exactly. It reestablishes the team bond. It shows you care about them as a person, not just their output. That's essential for preserving the relationship long term. It replaces that ineffective, angry accusation with a structured, empathetic process that actually looks for a solution and maintains everyone's dignity.
Let's dig a bit deeper into the language itself, specifically the I statement versus the you statement. We tend to default to you automatically. Why is I feel so psychologically different from you are?
It's fundamental.
Yeah.
You statements are inherently judgments. You are lazy, you didn't finish it, you're being difficult.
Right. They feel like an attack.
They're perceived as attacks.
Yeah.
They immediately put the other person on the defensive because you're labeling them, categorizing them. And when someone feels judged, their only real option is to deny it, fight back, or shut down.
So the conversation just stalls. It becomes a debate about their character, not the project issue.
Precisely. I statements, on the other hand, are simply reports. They report on your internal state or your perception. I feel concerned. I'm worried about the timeline. I notice there seems to be a gap in the data. These are statements about your experience.
And the other person can't really argue with your feeling.
Exactly. They can't reasonably say, no, you don't feel concerned. They can only respond to the factual basis of your feeling, the missing research, the deadline. They can't argue about your internal state.
So by using I, you're owning your own reaction and observation. It separates the issue itself from the other person's core identity.
It's incredibly effective. It lets you state the difficult truth. The work isn't done, but creates this safety net. It allows the other person to explain why it isn't done, perhaps without feeling personally attacked.
And this isn't just for students dealing with slackers, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
This is gold standard stuff in management, in mentoring, and any kind of effective professional communication. Learning to structure feedback this way signals real maturity.
Okay. So we've navigated the digital world. We've managed high-stakes conflict. Now let's pivot again. Section 3. The art of the follow-up. This tackles what you called, I think, the largest black hole in modern social life.
Yeah, the great social dead end. We've all done this. You meet someone interesting, maybe at a networking event, a club meeting, even just a class.
You have a really good conversation, engaging, maybe funny. There's a real connection.
A genuine spark, yeah.
Yeah.
You exchange ideas, find common ground.
And then how does it end? It ends with that pleasant but totally vague, non-committal farewell.
It was really nice talking to you. See you around sometime.
And poof, the connection just evaporates. Gone.
It's such a massive missed opportunity. The initial spark was real, but the bridge from person I just met to actual connection, it never got built.
So the follow-up is that bridge.
The follow-up is the intentional action, the necessary step that bridges that gap.
Yeah.
It's what turns a fleeting moment into potentially something durable, valuable, whether that's mentorship, friendship, or a professional contact.
Okay, but the anxiety kicks in here for people, right? How do I follow up without seeming desperate or awkward? What's the timing? What platform? Do I instantly friend them on Facebook or LinkedIn 5 minutes later?
Generally, no. That immediate social media request can feel a bit forward, maybe even intrusive, especially if the chat was brief.
So what's better?
We usually recommend a low-pressure, intentional direct message. Could be email, text, maybe a LinkedIn message if it was a professional context. The key is the timing, within 24 to 48 hours, while the conversation is still reasonably fresh in both your minds.
And the content of that message has to be right.
The content is everything. It has to count.
Okay, let's nail down the formula. You suggested 3 elements for an effective low-pressure follow-up.
That's right. Element 1 is super simple. Identification.
Just say who you are.
Clearly and immediately remind them who you are and where you met. Don't make them guess or struggle to place you. Simple. Hey, name. It's your name. We met at the event place last night.
Okay, basic context. Get that done first. Element 2, you said this was the crucial one.
Element 2 is specificity. This is the absolute non-negotiable step. It's the proof.
Proof of what?
Proof that you are actually listening, that you are genuinely engaged. You must reference a specific detail from your conversation. An anecdote they shared, a specific topic you discussed, an idea you both kicked around.
Why is that so important?
Because it validates them. It
Right.
makes the message personal, not generic. It shows you remember them and what they said.
Can you give an example, like generic versus specific?
Sure. A generic follow-up is like, hey, it was great chatting with you. Hope we can talk again soon.
Yeah, that requires zero thought. Means nothing.
Exactly. A specific follow-up shows you paid attention. Let's say you talked about their recent trip. You could say, it was fascinating hearing about your trip to the Rockies. I'm definitely adding those specific trails you mentioned to my bucket list.
That's instantly way more powerful, referencing the Rockies trip.
It demonstrates 2 key things. 1, I actually listened to something you were excited about. And 2, I remember you specifically, not just as someone I talked to.
That validation, that's the bridge you were talking about.
That's the entire bridge. It transforms the follow-up from a generic courtesy that maybe feels obligatory to a personalized connection. It makes the other person want to reply because they feel seen and remembered. That specificity is what starts turning an acquaintance into a potential friend or colleague.
And this works just as well professionally, right? If you met a potential mentor.
Absolutely. Say they talk about a challenge their company's facing. Your follow-up could reference that.
How?
It was really insightful learning about your team's challenge migrating to that new CRM platform. Actually, I stumbled across this article about similar transitions today, and out of our conversation, thought you might find it interesting.
Okay, that's super valuable. It's low pressure, shows you were engaged, and that you're thinking about their specific interests after the fact.
Precisely. It adds value without demanding anything. Okay, final element.
Element 3, the low pressure closing.
Right. This is just a friendly, easy ending. It signals hope for future contact, but doesn't require an immediate stressful commitment from them. Keep it light.
Right.
Hope to see you at the next club meeting lecture. Or look forward to maybe bumping into you around the department. Something simple.
You're just leaving the door open, not scheduling the next meeting right then and there.
Exactly. You're setting the stage for continuation, not forcing it.
Okay, that 3-part formula, identification, specificity, low pressure closing, that really seems to lower the anxiety barrier for reaching out. It's concrete, actionable.
It is. And if you want to take it one step further,
Yeah.
if you want to move from just a nice follow-up message to actually setting up the next interaction,
Okay.
you need to bridge that follow-up to suggesting a low-stakes activity.
Right. And I think the mistake most people make is jumping straight to a formal one-on-one. Want to grab coffee next week, which can feel weirdly intense, almost like a date or a formal networking interview with someone you barely know.
Precisely. That intensity can be a real barrier. The group activity suggestion is usually much, much better for these early stage connections.
So instead of want to get coffee, just us.
You offer the safety net of a group. Something like, hey, a few of us from the club class, we're thinking of grabbing coffee before the next meeting to chat about the readings. Would you want to join us?
Ah, that's clever. The group context makes it casual. It lowers the pressure massively.
Totally. It removes the intensity of a one-on-one commitment. It frames the interaction around a shared interest, the club, the class, makes it feel relaxed, normal.
It lets the connection develop more naturally within a social context that already exists.
Exactly. It removes that immediate personal pressure and makes saying yes seem like a really easy, logical next step. It smooths that transition from acquaintance to potential colleague or friend beautifully.
This has been such a practical toolkit. Seriously, we've put structure on the digital chaos, we've got a plan for tough conversations, and now a way to actually build on those initial meetings. Let's zoom out now. Section 4, the overarching theme. What does all this really mean for you, the listener?
Yeah, let's synthesize. So what does it all add up to? We started with managing simple digital tone.
Emojis, group chats.
Right. Then we navigated the really tricky psychological territory of conflict, difficult feedback.
The feedback sandwich.
Yep. And we just wrapped up with the practical steps, the architecture, for building relationships through the follow-up.
The common thread I'm seeing through every single technique. From picking the right emoji, to phrasing that feedback carefully, to remembering that specific detail in the follow-up. It feels like a huge shift. A shift from just letting communication happen.
Making it happen intentionally.
Yes. From accidental communication to intentional communication.
That is absolutely the core synthesis of this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
Good relationships, whether they're highly professional or deeply personal, they don't just happen by accident.
They're not just luck or fate.
Not at all. They are built consciously through deliberate, intentional effort. One carefully thought out message, one genuinely specific follow-up at a time. That mindset shift, it's the defining difference
Between someone who just passively exists in their social world.
and someone who actively, strategically designs their social network, their connections, their relationships.
It's about being deliberate in those choices. Deliberate about using the feedback sandwich to protect someone's dignity, even when you're frustrated.
Deliberate about segmenting your group chat message to respect everyone else's time and attention.
And deliberate about remembering and mentioning that specific detail from a conversation to show genuine respect and listening.
When you stop seeing social interaction as just something you have to endure
Yeah.
and start seeing it as a skill set, something you actively manage, refine, practice, your outcomes just fundamentally change. That intentionality, that's the engine driving all next level social success. It smooths out the friction and ramps up the positive impact.
Okay, but what if you're listening to this and feeling kind of overwhelmed? All these rules, these frameworks, the sandwich, the 3-part follow-up, it feels like a lot to remember and implement all at once.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
And we absolutely must reinforce the core principle here. This is a practice mindset.
Like learning anything new.
Exactly like learning an instrument or a sport or a language. These are learnable skills. And crucially, like any skill, you will make mistakes learning them.
You're going to mess up.
You're going to mess up. Your first try at the feedback sandwich might feel super awkward and clunky. You'll definitely send a text that lands weirdly sometimes. You'll miss a reply in a group chat. It happens.
And that's okay.
It's totally okay. The goal isn't instant perfection. It's not flawless execution from day one. The goal is consistent awareness and consistent effort.
So keep trying.
Keep trying, keep practicing, and critically, learn from those little stumbles. Every awkward text gives you data about digital tone. Every clumsy feedback attempt is practice in phrasing things empathetically.
The only real failure is just giving up and going back to purely passive communication.
Exactly. Don't withdraw. Start small. Maybe just focus on using emojis strategically for a week. Then, the next time you meet someone new, consciously try that 3-part follow-up formula. Baby steps.
So the ultimate goal isn't being perfect, but just being consistently more mindful, more intentional in how we connect.
That's it. That intentional effort, even if imperfect, will compound over time. It will yield huge returns in your studies, your career, your personal life.
Okay. So wrapping up this deep dive, you're now equipped, hopefully, with a pretty advanced toolkit.
A toolkit for complexity, yeah. To recap the major tools we covered today, first we tackled that digital minefield.
Right. Intentional digital etiquette. Strategic emojis for tone.
Segmenting group chats for focus, using the reply feature.
And setting clear boundaries around the double text, knowing when it's okay and when it's not.
Exactly. Second, we introduced that really vital tool for high-stakes situations, the feedback sandwich.
Emphasizing those I statements.
And focusing critique strictly on behavior and impact, never ever on character. Protecting dignity while solving problems.
And finally, we laid out that, frankly, revolutionary 3-part follow-up formula.
Identification, specificity, and the low-pressure closing.
The key to intentionally building that bridge, turning casual chats into actual meaningful connections.
Yeah, making sure those sparks don't just fizzle out.
So the mastery of all these advanced skills, it really depends less on getting it perfect every single time.
Much less on perfection, yeah.
And far more on just being consistently willing to take that small risk, the risk of connecting intentionally.
Keep practicing. Keep learning from the mistakes. Keep being deliberate in how you build your social world.
Communication really is a journey, isn't it? Constant iteration.
It absolutely is. The best communicators aren't the ones who never stumble. They're the ones who are always willing to take that calculated risk again and again to try and connect just a little bit deeper. So, go out and start building those bridges.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for walking us through all that. And thanks to you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you in the next one.